Good morning here in Washington, D.C. Good afternoon in Chisinau and elsewhere in Europe. My name is John Herbst. I am in charge of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. We have a terrific event for you right now with Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs from Moldova, Mihai Popșoi, a Moldovan politician who from 2019 to 2024 has served as Vice President of the Moldovan Parliament. Since September of 2017, he's been the Vice President and International Secretary of the ruling Action and Solidarity Party of Moldova. So it's our great honor to have him here to talk about what's going on in his country and more broadly in Eastern Europe. The United States has a great interest in ensuring stability and prosperity in Moldova and elsewhere in the region, a particular problem given Moscow's big invasion of Ukraine. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. He will talk for about 10 or so minutes. Then he and I will have a moderated conversation, after which we'll open the floor so that you can all ask questions. So, Mr. Minister, please.
Dear Ambassador Herbst, dear friends, it is a distinct pleasure for me to see so many great friends of the Republic of Moldova here in Washington today. I'm happy to inform you that the Republic of Moldova, despite the enormous challenges coming our way in the past 3 years and frankly beyond, is not just muddling through, but is reaching meaningful progress. This is a testament to the resilience of the Moldovan people, but it is also, equally so, a testament to the great partnership that we enjoy with the United States and our friends in the European Union. Moldova now, as we speak, is no longer dependent on energy on Gazprom. We have diversified our energy supply. We have taken charge of our sovereignty, having established the diversification of energy supply, having increased our energy mix with significant emphasis on renewables. We are also keeping the situation stable when it comes to the Transnistrian region, even though there has been an artificial crisis this January when the gas supply to the region was cut off by the Kremlin arbitrarily. And you can imagine having children in the business of the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova with, of course, facilitation with enormous influence and all sorts of hybrid tactics being employed, but the Moldovan society withstood, and especially the Moldovan diaspora, which is less susceptible to these hybrid tactics. All Moldovans have spoken loud and clear that the legitimate craving of the Moldovan people is to be part of the European Union. Lately, the European Union has put forward the largest support package for the Republic of Moldova, 1.9 billion euros. Which is almost $2 billion. This is a significant investment in Moldova's future. And what is also important to mention in this regard, unlike previously, and there have been times in the Republic of Moldova, and we'll be the first to admit, where support was less transparent where it was going, and not all of it was reaching where it's supposed to go. We remember the billion-dollar fraud and many other negative pages of Moldovan history. Nowadays, and in fact, since the party that I have the honor of representing came into power, we can vouch for every penny that is coming to the Republic of Moldova. And you can see that in the infrastructure projects, in small villages, in schools, in kindergartens, in the improvement of the energy security of the Republic of Moldova, in the investments that we make in cybersecurity. And all these investments have kept Moldova firmly anchored onto the European path. Speaking of the investments in security broadly and cybersecurity in particular, the Republic of Moldova has been a petri dish of hybrid tactics. And us being at the forefront, it is in the interest of our partners for us to be more resilient and able to withstand these assaults, so that we can share in turn with our partners so they don't have to suffer. By the same token, investments that we've made in our border police, intelligence, customs, together with partners in the United States, have made the Republic of Moldova safer, including in the face of international organized crime, human trafficking, drugs trafficking. This helps Moldova share information with its partners and make not just Moldova, but the entire region safer. In fact, there's been one case, thankfully, about 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, where thanks to the training that Moldovan police received from American counterparts, and it might have been actually during the previous Trump administration, if I come to think about it, that Moldovan police intercepted in the Republic of Moldova a shipment of plutonium that was coming through our region. And of course, we don't have the expertise in that area. It was thanks to the training that Moldovan police received from American partners that we were able to implement those operations and, again, make not just ourselves, but the entire global community safer. The Republic of Moldova, as I mentioned, is stronger and more resilient now than it was 3-4 years ago. And if you would have told me 3-4 years ago that we will no longer be dependent on Gazprom, that we would be a EU-candidate country and firmly advance towards European membership, even with all my chronic optimism, I would have been skeptical. That would have been a bridge too far, even for my optimism. But that's the truth in Moldova now. In the past election, which have been organized very well, and free and fair elections have been ensured, like we always try to do in the Republic of Moldova, President Sandu was re-elected, which probably tells you that we must be doing something right in Moldova. That even after 35% inflation 2 years ago, which was an aftermath of the energy crisis imposed by the Kremlin on us, we managed to have President Sandu re-elected and the EU referendum pass. And I find it sometimes peculiar when some of my colleagues are telling me of how hard they've had in their countries with 5 or 7% inflation. And in their case of the Republic of Moldova, with 35% inflation, which thankfully now has subsided, we've come back to what is normal for Moldova, about 5% at the end of the year. We've managed to convince the citizens of the Republic of Moldova that the course that the President Sandu has charted is the right one. And despite all the challenges, despite all the attempts to undermine the Republic of Moldova, to take it away from the legitimate craving of its people to be part of the European family of nations, we've stayed the course. And this is the testament to the support that we've received from our partners, and our partnership with the United States has been stellar. The support that the US has provided to the Republic of Moldova throughout the years has made Moldova a stronger, more resilient partner, firmly anchored in the free world, as President Sandu likes to say, and the Republic of Moldova fighting. And we very much look forward to continuously consolidating this partnership in the security domain, in the investments in the Republic of Moldova, because I'm a firm believer, and this is a cliche from development studies, but I will say it nonetheless, that we would be much better off with the fishing rod rather than the fish. Then again, budget support is great. We'll take it any day of the week. But investment is what allows us to stand on our 2 feet, and we very much welcome American investments in the Republic of Moldova for a mutually beneficial relationship. We are also fully engaged in helping Ukraine, not just throughout the war and welcoming the largest number of refugees per capita, but we're also positioning ourselves to be one of the main conduits for the reconstruction effort. We are providing everything we have to help Ukraine rebuild. And in this vein, we'd like to commend the Trump administration for the peace through strength agenda. Peace is what all of us need, and strength is what Putin understands. And we very much look forward to a just and lasting peace in Ukraine that will serve the interest of the Ukrainian people, who've been incredibly courageous and have shown the entire world that not only could they withstand the first 3 days, which many of us, let's be honest, were allowing them at the beginning of the war, but they withstood more than 3 years now, showing remarkable feats of courage and resilience, which is yet another testament to the great partnership that our region has with the United States and our European allies. And we very much look forward to the time when peace will be reestablished in Ukraine and in our region, so that we can develop our economies, work our soil to the benefit of our people, and be reliable and trusted partners to our friends in the United States, in Europe, and beyond. So we very much look forward for the peace process to commence. We've been encouraged by the recent discussions in Jeddah and elsewhere, and we very much look forward to a lasting and just peace, because that is the only solution that will reestablish stability in our region, and that will help us take charge of the opportunities that God is providing us in our region. So I'd like to thank the Trump administration for all the efforts in Ukraine, in support of the Republic of Moldova, because any and every support Moldova gets, it's support for Ukraine. And every and any support Ukraine gets, it's also support for the Republic of Moldova, because Ukraine has been defending us as much as they've been defending themselves. And we cannot thank them enough for their enormous sacrifice. The Republic of Moldova will remain there for Ukraine. The Republic of Moldova will remain there for the United States. Thank you.
Mr. Minister, thank you for those brief but nonetheless comprehensive remarks. For the audience, we don't have a mic in the room, so you have to submit your questions on your cell phones or on your iPads at askac.org. But I will first have the privilege of asking the minister a few questions, then we'll turn to you. You faced a very serious problem when Moscow invaded Ukraine large 3 years ago, with the cynical effort to put you in a crisis with this ending of the gas supplies. You've managed that. How does the gas situation look now? And you mentioned how the Russians played games with their clients, in quotation marks, in Transnistria. What are the Transnistrians thinking as a result of that? Both about Moscow and, of course, about Ms. Sandu's government.
Well, when it comes to the energy crisis of 3 years ago, this was clearly an artificial crisis. We had a standing contract with Gazprom. We were abiding by that contract. Unfortunately, they chose to undermine our energy security and to create economic challenges for us, in the hope of undermining the government. That has been the playbook ever since, and frankly, before that. But, you know, there is this saying in politics that politicians do the right thing before they exert all the other options. In the Republic of Moldova, we should have diversified our energy supply long before that. And our friends in Brussels have been nudging us, well, our predecessors, frankly, to diversify, to implement the third energy package, to unbundle the energy system. And our predecessors have kicked the can down the road. And I will be totally honest with you, we would have probably done that as well, probably not for that long as our predecessors, but the fact that we've been pushed with our backs against the wall, we diversified very quickly, we have synchronized our energy grid with that of the EU, and now we are safer and stronger because of that. And now we can no longer be blackmailed, and we will never be put in that position again. The Transnistrian region is still vulnerable, and this has been manifest in January when the gas supply was cut off. But this is also, like with any crisis, there is always a silver lining. With this crisis, of course, the folks in the Transnistrian region started questioning themselves and their pro-Russian attitude. When your kids are freezing and you know who put you in this position, you start to reassess the reality. Of course, the perceptions don't change overnight, but the fact that it was the European Union, upon Moldova's request, that has come to the rescue, and only afterwards the Kremlin has put forward the proposal to reinstate the supply, has shown Moldovan citizens on both sides of the river, but particularly our citizens in the Transnistrian region, that a friend in need is a friend indeed, and the European Union has proven to be that friend. European Union has been by our side with the resources necessary if, God forbid, any other crisis entails. But, call me biased, but the Moldovan government has also been steadfast in making sure that we have constant discussions with the folks on the left bank to not create further instability, to not put any more pressure than they've already been under as a result of the crisis. And our Prime Minister, who was also acting energy minister, a great time to be energy minister during such a crisis, but he managed to pull it off in a brilliant way, to maintain stability, to not escalate the situation, and to ultimately solve the crisis, at least for the time being, because this arrangement that we have now is not exactly sustainable in the long term. It's not a very orthodox solution, but we've been sort of used to unorthodox solutions when it comes to the Transnistrian issue for the time being. But the Republic of Moldova is more resilient and more secure, and we'll be working hard to make sure that that extends to the Transnistrian region of the Republic of Moldova going forward.
When you say that the solution you have is unorthodox, is it also expensive?
It is expensive. Well, gas is naturally expensive, but the unorthodox part pertains to the supply route, which the Kremlin now is providing gas to the Transnistrian region through the Hungarian companies. It's a longer route, but this has stabilized the situation for the time being. And we have the plan B in place. If the situation gets out of hand, we have the resources to remedy the situation so that we don't allow for our citizens to find themselves on the receiving end of Kremlin's wrath, as this has been the case in January. So we have the contingencies in place, but for the time being, the situation is stable, and we are committed to keeping it that way.
Do you expect the changing attitudes amongst the Transnistrian population to ultimately have an impact on the leadership within Transnistria and their interaction with the legitimate government in Chisinau?
Yes, and I think they have what they call elections soon. There has been a time where there was a vibrant political competition in the region. And Ambassador Hill certainly remembers that when there was robust competition to the point where the designated Kremlin candidate lost the election, so-called election there. Now, unfortunately, that's no longer the case. All the opposition has been demolished. But at the same time, we are committed to building bridges, both physical and metaphorical. We do not want to put any more pressure on our citizens there than they already have suffered for the past 30 years. We care for our citizens, unlike what the Kremlin has indicated time and time again, that when it comes to Russian speakers, be it in Moldova, including in the Transnistrian region, or in Ukraine, that have been suffering from enormous killing and destruction in the past 3 years, and frankly, over 10 years now. We care for our citizens, and we are firmly committed to making sure that we help them in time of need, and we have shown that in a very clear way in this crisis by reaching out to our friends in the European Union, by reaching out to all of our partners to come up with solutions, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. All right. You mentioned in your remarks the gains you've made on the issue of accession to the EU. Would you give us, you might say, an update as to what specific things you need to get done, and if you have any sense of the timeline, which I realize is a little bit sensitive?
No, the timeline is the first thing that I'm happy to talk about. Our commitment was to be full-fledged members by 2030. Then we reconsidered because the current mandate of the current Commission is until 2029. So we became even more ambitious. We need to make sure that we finalize the accession process by the end of the term of the current Commission, because we have enormous synergy with the current chairwoman of the Commission and the Commissioner for Enlargement, and in fact the whole College of the Commissioners. That is because we're firmly committed to doing the heavy lifting back home, and we see reciprocity from our friends in Brussels and in member states, quite frankly. All of the EU member states are supportive of Moldova, are also providing assistance in terms of even technical expertise, because we'll be the first to admit there are policy areas where we're struggling, where we don't have enough expertise, and we're getting support from basically every member state, be it on fiscal policy, be it on labor, be it on environmental policy, agriculture, to plug some of the gaps that we have. And this sort of openness and support from member states gives us reassurances that we'll be able to live up to these expectations that we've set for ourselves and for our citizens, to hopefully have the negotiations ongoing for the next 3 years or so, and then have a little bit of space for the ratification process. This has been done before. There have been countries that have taken a comparable amount of time to negotiate. Moldova has been quite advanced in implementing the association agreement and the deep and comprehensive free trade area with the European Union. And our current issues, if you put aside justice reform, which you really cannot put aside, but from a technical perspective, we'll be able to navigate this process in an effective way in light of our commitment, but also the enormous technical support that we get. Now, if we're talking about the thing that we just put aside, justice reform is the cornerstone of not just our political DNA, if you will, because President Sandu, when we came to power, the two pillars of our political agenda was justice reform and European integration, and they're very much intertwined. Because without properly functioning judiciary, we cannot hope for EU membership. And quite frankly, we cannot have high hopes for real economic development. I cannot provide assurances to a foreign investor or frankly to a Moldovan investor that without an independent and integrity-driven judiciary, you're not going to have a drive in investments. That's why in the past 3 years now, we have basically cleaned up the system of the most corrupt judges and prosecutors. Now we are on the last stretch of this effort, of the vetting process of the entire justice system. Now only the moderately corrupt judges are left in the system, and we are firmly committed of getting rid of those as well, so that, and I will not insult anybody's intelligence to say that we will have no corruption in the system. Show me a country where there is no corruption in the justice system, and I will show you a liar. The fact that we are committed to just reset the system where the default options are integrity, rather than default options being corruption, which has been sadly the story of not just Moldova, but many countries in our region. But many countries have shown that it's possible to clean up the house, and countries that have joined the EU 20 years ago are now thriving, and we have the firm commitment to clean up, or rather to finish the cleanup of the justice system, even though, honestly speaking, there might be some hope, if that would be the right word, among some of these moderately corrupt judges that I just mentioned that are still in the system, that they would be able to run out the clock and outlive us in the hope that we would lose the next election and they would be able to go back to business as usual. Well, I can send them a message from Washington that they will not go back to business as usual. We'll see this reform through, because this is just so essential for Moldova's future. Because we've seen for far too long in Moldova justice not being served, and we ending up in a bidding war in trials. People, not those that have, that are in the right winning, but those that pay more. That's not sustainable. That's not how you develop the country. And the fact that we've already cleaned up the Supreme Council of Magistracy, the Supreme Council of Prosecutors, the Supreme Court now is in the process of being vetted, the Court of Appeals. This is the foundation of our political commitment. And so far, the process has been going on track, and the United States has been very helpful in this process. The vetting commissions contained also judges or former judges from the US, from the Netherlands, from Italy. And together, we've managed to significantly progress on this agenda. And again, the firm commitment of our government is to finish this cleaning process so that Moldovan society and Moldovan economy can thrive and have a properly functioning, integrity-driven judiciary. That is our commitment, and we'll see this through.
That's a very upbeat analysis of reform in the criminal justice sector. Would you say that Moldovan businesses share your assessment as to how things are moving?
Well, Moldovan businesses, like Moldovan citizens overall, would certainly like to see the situation progress faster. And I would concur with that position. We would all like to see the situation improve faster. But when you've had 30 years of neglect and corruption and despair, and a situation where the political establishment and the corrupt justice system and parts of the business community who went into politics to make even more money and protect their businesses, this is not easy to change overnight. And even in the past 3 years, significant progress has been made, but of course not all the goals have been achieved. This is evident in some of the delayed prosecutions. This is evident in our still struggling efforts to repatriate some of the fugitive oligarchs who are still roaming around, but we have progress now with some of our partners to start the extradition process. Because, if there is one thing the Moldovan citizens deserve, I think it's clear by now that most of the money from the billion-dollar fraud will be very difficult, if not at all impossible, to recuperate. But adding insult to injury, not seeing the perpetrators in prison, is really difficult to stomach for Moldovan citizens. So one thing that we have to deliver is justice for the perpetrators of the billion-dollar fraud. Because if you put that in context of US or any other country, the billion-dollar fraud was a fraud of 12% of Moldovan GDP. Just try to put that in context of US or any other country. 12% of GDP is a big number. And just imagine the opportunity cost of that fraud. Should Moldovans have been able to use those resources for the development of our country, we would have been a lot better off nowadays compared to where we are. Of course, we're not happy with the outcome. We would have liked things to be a lot better. But in light of the enormous challenges that we've gone through in the past 3 years in particular, I think we've done relatively well. And I think the people have spoken when it comes to the election with the second mandate for President Sandu and for the passing of the EU referendum, albeit with a narrow margin. But as my friends keep telling me, a win is a win. And I've come around to accept that. Because it's also a lesson in expectations management, because our expectations of the outcome of the presidential elections and the EU referendum were much more optimistic in light of the polls that we had. We didn't quite factor in the interference and the hybrid tactics that have been employed against us and the extent of those tactics. But nonetheless, we won, and next time around we'll probably have to set lower expectations so that we are happy when we win rather than being depressed when we win. That's a lesson for us in expectations management.
Okay, I agree with you that President Sandu and her government have a very good story to tell for all but the authoritarian world. You've already mentioned the elections. So last year, President Sandu won, despite very, very intensive efforts by the Kremlin to produce a different outcome. You're going to have parliamentary elections this year. What are you seeing the Kremlin do already to advance their candidates in Moldova? And what steps are you taking against it?
Well,
Those efforts.
one that they have done from the beginning of the war, and quite frankly before, is engage in fear-mongering and warmongering in an attempt to scare Moldovans into submission, to scare Moldovans into giving away their hope to be members of the European Union, and to break the will of the Moldovans to exercise their sovereignty and to basically bow down to the Kremlin and its whims. This hasn't happened. Of course, the Kremlin doesn't rest, and they're trying to double down. The initial tactic was to, buy Moldovan politicians, and unfortunately, there have been plenty for sale. Ironically, that hasn't worked because many of them were so corrupt that half of the money that they were receiving didn't go to the goals that the Russians expected. Sort
of like the Russian military.
This is, I don't think I should say it, but this is the upside of corruption. The other attempt that they've started making is to apart from the influence that they had in Moldovan media, in the Moldovan political class, they started to go at the root of sovereignty. They started to go directed to the voter. And they used the good old cash initially to bribe voters. And it's an incredibly difficult task when I come and I speak to our voters and I promote, the successes that we've achieved, and we speak frankly about the challenges that we face. But, we have something to show for, frankly, a lot more than some of our predecessors. And we have a clear strategy and a clear path forward to build Moldova stronger and better, more prosperous with our partners. But when those very citizens receive $100 or 100 euros in an envelope, 9 times out of 10, those citizens who are generally vulnerable will take that money. And that is a very, very difficult battle. Now we've increased fines, but we cannot prosecute 100,000 Moldovans, nor do we want that. We are going after the middlemen and the upper echelons that are organizing these schemes of undermining Moldovan democracy. We've had some successes with the growing resilience of our law enforcement. But the Russians are also adapting. From good old cash, they started going into bank transfers, and they use banks in our region, in some of our partner countries. We reach out to them. They're usually very prompt to shut down these illegal transfers. But it's a bit of a whack-a-mole type of situation. You shut down one bank transfer for one country, they switch to another. But even there, we managed to quite effectively address it. So the latest and the most insidious tactic is crypto. Using crypto, and that is a lot more challenging for us to follow and to combat and to prosecute. And we are reaching out to our partners to be able to have an international regime that helps us address some of these illegal activities, because we know that it's not just Moldova that is vulnerable to these illegal transactions, and it undermines our national security. So these are some of the more dangerous elements of the tactics that are being employed. But again, we are learning, we are adapting, and we are sharing our difficulties, because we are a petri dish of these Russian tactics in Moldova, and we are sharing with our partners ways of mitigating them so that our partners don't have to endure what we have to endure. And again, even with all those resources funneled into the Moldovan political system illegally, which according to our estimate is up to 1% of our GDP was poured by the Kremlin in our previous campaign to bribe voters, to fund illegally pro-Russian political parties. But we managed to withstand. And out of that, we've come out more resilient, and we'll do our utmost to make sure that our political system remains on track. We remain firmly anchored in the democratic space, and we ensure the freedoms and liberties of our citizens, also going into the next parliamentary election, which will be a big test. But again, we are learning and we are adapting.
Russia, with some help from China, had some success trying to undermine the elections in Romania last year via TikTok. Have you seen anything comparable in Moldova?
Yes and no. The tactics have been sort of the same, but Moldovans have been probably less susceptible to them because we've endured them for so long and we've been more adept. And I think some of our friends and brothers in Romania are discovering them at somewhat of a later stage, whereas we have lived with that for some time and we've built a bit of an immunity. And we are happy to share this experience with our partners so that they can build an immunity as well and don't have to live with the negative consequences of enduring these hybrid tactics. So you could have also seen from the outcome of the Romanian election in Moldova, because many of us are Romanian citizens and polls have been held also in Moldova. You could see from the outcome that Moldovans with Romanian citizenship have been less susceptible to these tactics. So we might have a thing or two to teach some of our friends and brothers in Romania and beyond when it comes to withstanding and combating in a relatively effective way these tactics. And we are trying to do that. But I have confidence in the institutions in Romania, and they're going to have also elections in Poland and in many other countries. I have faith that the democratic institutions will be able to combat this hybrid tactics from abroad, because we have been able. And if Moldova was able to withstand this onslaught, then I'm confident that our partners and friends in the immediate neighborhood and beyond will be able to do the same.
That's a very interesting observation. I felt that Georgia also has immunities against that sort of Russian misinformation, although unfortunately other Russian tactics seem to be working there. But that's a subject for another day. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question before we turn to the audience. You have the upcoming elections this year. What's the stake? And what is the prospects for the upcoming elections this year, the parliamentary elections?
Well, the stakes could not be higher. Then again, I think voters in every country are used to this
phrase.
That every election is the most important
ever.
elections.
That's right.
But this time around, given that we have so much to lose, given that we are already advanced on our EU aspirations, given that we've built so much resilience in our energy system, it would be a shame for us to be brought back into the dependence to Gazprom, which some of the pro-Russian parties in Moldova are more than happy to do, because not only did they have no incentive to diversify energy supply and to be anchored in the free market and buy American LNG at a price that was lower than what the current contract with Gazprom provided us, because this was the case of Moldova last year or the year before, when we actually bought American LNG, and it was cheaper on the free market than what we would have bought otherwise under the existing contract with Gazprom. But the disincentive that some of the pro-Russian politicians in Moldova have, and they have clearly done that when they were in power, they have a strong incentive to maintain the corrupt contracts with Gazprom and with the Kuchurgan power plant in the Transnistrian region, because they were skimming the profits and putting them in offshore accounts, defrauding the Moldovan people and literally stealing from them. And they would certainly love to go back to that. It's easy money to be made. We do not wish to the Moldovan people to be put back to the situation where we were 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where we were so dependent on Gazprom, but also there were these corrupt schemes in energy supply contracts that basically defrauded Moldovan citizens and perpetuated the economic struggle that we have gone through. Now we have clear and transparent contracts. We buy resources on the international market. And that is the foundation of sovereignty, and that is the foundation of being anchored in the free world, in the free market. And not just that is at stake, but also democratic freedoms and liberties, because some, if not all, of the pro-Russian parties in Moldova would be happy to emulate the Russian model, where democratic freedoms are no longer there, democratic protests are no longer there. Curiously enough, there was a protest in Moscow the other day at the Moldovan embassy. And this seems to be
completely spontaneous.
And this seems to be the only protest that is allowed in Moscow these days. But we are happy to teach the Russian society democratic values, that you protest when you have something to say against how you see your well-being. But the fact that Moldova's democracy is at stake is clear, that Moldova's prosperity is at stake is clear, Moldova's anchoring in the free and democratic world is also at stake. And I'm confident that Moldovan citizens are firmly aware of that, and they would not want to lose all the gains that we've achieved in such a difficult battle in the past 4 or 5 years. So I'm cautiously optimistic that despite all the efforts to undermine us and to sabotage our political process, Moldovan citizens will be firmly determined to defend their democracy, to defend their country, both at home and in the diaspora. And one other thing that will likely be at stake is that the pro-Russian parties in Moldova are not particularly fond of Moldovan diaspora, because they are not so susceptible to the propaganda and to corruption and all that, as unfortunately some of the citizens back home are. And the vote of the diaspora is also at stake, because the Russian parties would not wait a minute to deprive Moldovan citizens abroad from their right to vote. So a lot of things are at stake, and we'll make sure to articulate that message in an effective way to all of our citizens, no matter the language they speak, no matter their ethnic background, because all of Moldovans who want a better future for their children know what is at stake.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take questions from the audience. I already said you can ask us online at askac.org, but since I made that comment, microphones are now in the room. So if those want to ask a question in the room, that's fine. Alex, you see who's putting their hand up first. I'll take the first question, which is online, from Alejandro Sanchez. And Mr. Minister, he asks, can you discuss the arrest of the Bashkan governor of Gagauzia, Yevgenia Gutul?
Well, this has been a long, ongoing process. The Bashkan has been part and parcel of what our prosecutors call the organized criminal group, headed by the fugitive oligarch Ilan Shor, who is hiding in Moscow. And our justice system will have to carry on with defending the democratic process and defending the rule of law in the Republic of Moldova. I cannot comment much on the legal process, because that's up to the prosecutors and the judges to decide. I can only ensure that this has absolutely nothing to do with politics or the insinuations that are trying to be made by some of these folks in Moldova, and we've seen this pattern. Plahotniuk has cried foul when he was being prosecuted, that he is prosecuted for political reasons, which was could not be further from the truth. The other oligarch that is hiding in London is also crying foul that he is being prosecuted for political reasons, which cannot be further from the truth. Every time an oligarch turned politician is being prosecuted for the crimes of stealing millions and millions, and in some case, $1 billion, from Moldovans. And that is also the case of what Shor is being accused of, as being one of the key perpetrators of this crime, and being convicted by the Moldovan Court of Appeals to 15 years in prison. They always cry foul on political prosecution. We are not the first, we are not the last to be in that situation. But Moldovan citizens know, and our international partners certainly know, to discern between truth and fiction.
Okay, thank you. Question from the audience. Okay, right here.
Good morning, Ariel Cohen, the Atlantic Council. With the geopolitical pressures rising in the region and the United States maybe reassessing its engagement in the region, what is your outlook for the next 5 years for Moldovan sovereignty and territorial integrity, and is an option of integration, reintegration, with Romania considered seriously at all? And the second question is, can you give us more details about the extradition of those perpetrators of mass fraud that you mentioned before? Thank you.
Well, when it comes to the reunification with Romania, I mean, this question pops up on a regular basis, but for the past 32 years, 34 years now, since Moldova's independence, the support for reintegration has been more or less steady, about a quarter to a third of the Moldovan population. Where there is overwhelming majority support in the Moldovan society and where there is a big consensus is that we will be reunited with our brothers in Romania and our good friends in the Baltics and our good friends in Poland and France and Germany in the European Union. That is a credible, realistic strategy, and that's where the majority of the Moldovan population is. There is a significant number that is in favor of the reunification, but in a democratic setting, important decisions about national sovereignty are decided in referenda, and there is no majority support for that agenda. But this has been heavily exploited by Russian propaganda as a fear-mongering tactic against or to scare the ethnic communities in Moldova, many of whom are Russian speakers. And this reappears on constant basis, but I think the Moldovans have realized by now what is an agenda that is tangible, that is European integration, and what is a legitimate aspiration, but also one that is used to divide Moldova by Russian propaganda, as we've seen not just in Moldova, but in many other countries. When it comes to the extradition of these fugitives, we've tried hard and will continue to try hard to bring these perpetrators to justice. There's been some positive momentum now with our friends in the UK to start the process, and we'll work hard to make sure that every single of these perpetrators, this fugitive from justice, is brought to justice in the Republic of Moldova, because, as I mentioned earlier, otherwise it would be adding insult to injury, because the funds will be very difficult to bring back, but at least they need to pay with their liberty for the enormous suffering that they've caused to the Moldovan people, and the enormous cynicism that we witness, for instance, with this oligarch in Russia, who was a perpetrator of the billion-dollar fraud, leaving Moldovans poor, and then exploiting the very poverty that they've left behind to undermine the Moldovan future by bribing them to vote a certain way, by scaring them, and that's just cynicism beyond comprehension.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question I'll take online from Ambassador William Hill. As part of Moldova's EU candidacy, reintegration of the Transnistrian region will likely be required. What's the current government thinking on how to accomplish this?
Reintegration is a firm commitment of the government, and unlike previous situations, now there are several distinctive circumstances. Number one, the control over the Moldovan-Ukrainian border on the Transnistrian segment is a game changer. This has not been the case for 30 years, and we'll be the first to say it, and our friends in Ukraine know it. The lifeline for the separatist regime in the Transnistrian region was the Odessa port and the open border. Now that is no longer the case. That is a game changer. The other important aspect is the developments in the exports. 80% of everything that is produced in the Transnistrian region goes to the European market. The rest of Moldova, 70%. So the Transnistrian region is even more anchored onto the European market than the rest of the country. So this is an important game changer. And then, of course, Moldova's path towards European Union is a very strong pull factor, because citizens in the Transnistrian region, just like citizens in the rest of Moldova, see the benefits of European integration and the opportunities that this avails. And even the so-called political elites there see the benefits of being full-fledged, law-abiding European citizens. There is a clear upside to that. And we know that the circumstances that we are facing now are significantly more conducive to peaceful reintegration than there have ever been. And we are firmly committed to peaceful reintegration. There is no other option that we see. And in light of these important changes on the ground, we'll work steadily, but in a determined fashion, to slowly but surely bring the left bank of the river into the constitutional and economic space of the Republic of Moldova. And we've done that last year with the customs tax. We'll also introduce other taxes gradually in exchange for services. We provide services and opportunities, and you have to be part of everything that Moldova has to offer. And for that, taxes are an important element.
I'm going to ask one specific question following up on that. You're right. The overall conditions, socioeconomic, political, point towards reintegration and Transnistria becoming a normal region in Moldova. But how do you turn that into an actual reintegration when the leadership in Transnistria, presumably the factors you've mentioned are important, but as long as you have an aggressive Kremlin, they can use both intimidation and bribery to keep the leaders in Transnistria doing exactly the wrong things. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think many on the ground in the Transnistrian region have seen that the challenges that they face and the risks that they find themselves under go far beyond any material benefit that they stand to gain from the bribery. Because when drones run above your heads and could at any point in time randomly destroy your home and the home of your family. Or other negative spillovers from the Russian aggression against Ukraine can affect you in a significant way. That's, I believe, outweighs any of the material gains that they might have enjoyed. The other caveat, of course, is the Russian illegal military presence in the Transnistrian region and the munitions that have been stationed there, that many of which should be disposed on site because they are untransportable, because they're very old.
An issue 30 years ago when I was working in this account.
Exactly. But that's also an opportunity for our friends in the EU and our good friends in Washington to finally liberate the region from this threat, because even a meteorological event can cause significant harm given the amount of munitions that are stored there, about 22,000 tons.
But how can they liberate the region from this threat?
Well, when discussions come with the Kremlin about sanctions relief, that would certainly be an item that could be discussed. And that would be a big win for our friends in the European Union, for our wonderful, great partners here in Washington. That would be a big win for the Trump administration to make sure that the illegal presence of Russian troops and munitions in Moldova is no more.
Okay, question from the audience.
Michael Washura, I'm with The Insider. I have a question about how significant an advantage does outside interference give to your opposition? In places like Gagauzia, Orhiv, it's decisive. In Chisinau, of course, it's not. But overall, in the most recent elections, without the diaspora, the good guys would have lost a democratic election. I was in Chisinau in February 2023. I was very impressed with how the Sandu government controlled the bust-in protest movement that Shor was organizing. But in the most recent elections, that outside interference still had, as you described, a fairly big effect percentage-wise. What's that percentage? How big a majority do you need in order to retain power?
Thank you. Before you answer the question, Alex, the woman to your right, take two, please.
Yes, Linda Robinson with the Council on Foreign Relations. I would like to ask you to describe the U.S. aid cuts that your country suffered and detail what would be the most vital to restore, and if you have prospects for replacing that assistance should Washington not do that.
Well, number one, the percentage that we need to maintain the majority in Parliament is around 40% of the vote. Last time around, we got 53% of the vote, which translated into 63 seats in Parliament, 63% of seats in Parliament out of 101. Even with all my incurable optimism, I would not venture into saying that we will get 63 seats this time around. But over 50 is possible, and we'll work hard to maintain this majority. And around 40% of the vote should be manageable, because some of the latest polling that we've seen in Moldova is encouraging. Despite all the challenges that we've gone through, we have a fighting chance to maintain this majority, because otherwise, even if we end up with 49% of the seats in Parliament, we can still end up in opposition, as the pro-Russian parties will coalesce together in undermining us and in changing the course of Moldova's anchoring from the pro-Western to the pro-Russian one. So the numbers are cautiously optimistic and give us a fighting chance. The corruption of voters, the thousands and thousands of voters that have been given money in the previous election, will do everything in our power within the legal constraints, of course, to make sure that it doesn't happen in the scale that it has happened. We will unfortunately not be able to preclude that from happening in every case, unfortunately, but we'll make sure that this becomes a lot more manageable and insignificant in political terms. Because in the presidential election, in between the two rounds, we managed to address it to some degree, but we'll make sure that we not put us in the same position, the exposure that we've had in the previous election. When it comes to the remarkable support that we've received from the American people throughout the years, this has put us in a position where we are now, where we are a lot stronger and a lot more resilient, and a much stronger partner for our friends in Washington, Brussels, and EU member states. Some of the main areas that we hope to remain, apart from security assistance, which we've discussed already with our partners, and that seems to be more or less on track, the energy security, for us to be able to be truly diversified and to be able to continuously buy, be it American LNG or gas on the international market, to be able to have full sovereignty when it comes to our energy security. Those strategic energy projects are very important to us. The other very important area is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is important to us, but it's also important to our partners, because us being at the forefront at some of these most insidious cyber attacks, we are the first line of defense. And if we are resilient, we are able to share that information with our partners, and then they can be prepared ahead of time. So energy security and cybersecurity are the two primary areas. When it comes to other also important policy areas where funding may no longer be there, and we respect the priorities of the new administration, the American voters have spoken, and it's clear to us that priorities have changed, and we respect that. We'll be working out to find resources domestically, and we'll be working with our partners in Europe that have been incredibly supportive to try to address some of these gaps that might arise from some of the policy areas that may no longer be prioritized by the administration in Washington. We have been incredibly thankful for the support that we've received throughout the years that has made us a lot stronger, and we remain thankful for any and every support that we've received from now on, because it will be, and it has been, in mutual interest, both of the United States and the Republic of Moldova. But we will be also working with our partners in Europe to maintain Moldova's sovereignty and stability across policy areas.
Mr. Minister, this has been terrific. You've been a wonderful guest and interlocutor. We hope to see you in the future, and if we can help you and you're a marvelous ambassador, we're happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to Atlantic Council and Ambassador Herbst for being such wonderful hosts. Thank you.